Lesson 3, Chapter 7, and the title of this lesson is Triangles. We go back to the essential question, how does geometry help us describe real-world objects? And the good thing about this is that we see triangles all around us. And in this particular lesson, okay, we are going to talk about a lot of vocabulary words. We're going to discuss what an acute triangle is, a right triangle, an obtuse triangle, a scalene triangle, isosceles triangle, an equilateral triangle, triangle in general, and we're going to talk about congruent segments. Okay, let's jump into it. Let's take a look at the real world link. Oh, before we do that, there are two objectives that we will be doing here. First, we will be classifying triangles, and we are going to talk about angles of triangles. Okay, so Julia practices jumping on a ski ramp. The front of the ramp is a triangle like the one shown below. So this is Julia's ramp right here. This is 80 degrees. This is X. And we know that this is a right triangle. Therefore, this becomes 90 degrees. Okay. So it's asking us draw an X to the type of type of angle that is not shown in the triangle. You know that this is less than 90 degrees, so that's an acute triangle, so that's shown there. You know that this is a right angle, so that means this is a right angle. I'm sorry, this is a acute angle, okay? And since we know that this is also less than 90 degrees, that's also an acute angle. So therefore, the angle that is not shown here is an obtuse angle. Because remember what an obtuse angle is. An obtuse angle is an angle greater than 90 degrees but less than 180 degrees. Okay? So measure the unknown angle. Describe the relationship between 80 degrees angle and an unknown angle. Okay? So if I measure that with a protractor, okay, remember what a protractor is. Okay? If I measure that, that's not probably, but it's going to be 10 degrees. Okay? And I will show you exactly how we find 10 degrees later as we go through the lesson. Okay? So the second question, describe the relationship between 80 degrees and the unknown angle. Okay? Since 80 degrees plus 10 degrees equals 90 degrees, right? Since 80 degrees plus 10 degrees equals 90 degrees, right? The angles are complementary, okay? Complementary. So basically what it's saying, remember what complementary angles are. Complementary angles are angles that have a sum of 90 degrees, okay? Next, number 3, draw a triangle with one obtuse angle. So obtuse angle, remember it's an angle that is greater than 90 degrees. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a straight line, and then I'm going to draw another line that's more than 90 degrees now, and then I'm going to close this up, okay? So that means that is a triangle with one obtuse angle. So this is your obtuse angle right here. Okay? So is it possible to draw a triangle with two obtuse angles? Okay? So if you want to draw two obtuse angles in a triangle, okay, that is definitely not possible. No, it's not possible. Okay? Because what happens is that, okay, when you have two obtuse angles, when you have two obtuse angles, okay, the rays of the angles cannot connect. Oops, sorry. The rays of the angles cannot connect. That means it cannot form a triangle. Okay, let me give you an example right here. So this is an obtuse angle right here. That's an obtuse angle, just like what I did on top. And if I'm going to draw another obtuse angle, okay, which is greater than 90 degrees, look at this, okay, it's not going to connect to make a triangle. What's going to happen is that if I connect these two rays right here, that's not going to be a triangle. That's going to be something else. That's a quadrilateral. And that's the reason why it cannot happen. Because it cannot form a triangle, okay, if you have two obtuse angles. Okay? All right. Let's classify some angles then. So when you want to classify angles, okay, uh, this is what we call an acute triangle. Why is it an acute triangle? Because all the angles are acute. So you have all acute angles, meaning all the angles have angles that are less than 90 degrees. So the next triangle we're going to talk about is what we call a right triangle. And in a right triangle, you have one right angle. So this is one right angle. This is a right triangle. Now, if you notice in a right triangle, okay, we have one right angle and two acute angles. Okay, so you have one right angle and two acute angles. In an obtuse triangle, which is the next figure right here, this is your obtuse angle. Again, you have one obtuse angles and you also have two acute angles. In acute triangle, you have three acute angles. Okay? Oops, I forgot the L. There you go. Okay? So that's how we classify our triangles. Okay, and there are three more that we are going to talk about. Okay, let's do this then, since I already uncovered it. This is what we call an isosceles triangle. And in an isosceles triangle, you have two congruent sides. Remember the word congruent? Congruent means the same measure. So this side right here have the same measure. And how do we know that they have the same measure? That hash mark tells us that line. Okay, one line tells us that they have the same measure. Okay, so when you talk about again an isosceles triangle, you have two sides that have the same measure. Okay, in a in an equilateral triangle, which is this one right here, okay, you have three congruent sides. Again, look at the double hash mark. It's the same for all three sides. Therefore, these three sides are congruent. Okay, so equilateral triangle, all the sides are congruent. In an isosceles triangle, only two sides are congruent. And there's one last triangle that we need to talk about. It's what we call a scalene triangle. In a scalene triangle, no sides are congruent. Okay? So isosceles, two sides, equilateral, three sides. In a scalene triangle, no sides are congruent. Okay, let's talk about what a triangle is in general. Okay? So a triangle is a figure with three sides and three angles. Okay? And the symbol for a triangle obviously will be the shape of a triangle. So when you see that shape right there, it means triangle. We're going to look at it, we're going to see that later in the examples. Another thing that we need to understand is that for every triangle has at least two acute angles. Okay, we know this from here. At least two acute angles. An acute triangle has three acute angles. One way you can classify a triangle is by using the third angle, and that's what we did. Okay, the third angle here is a right angle, so therefore this is a right triangle. The third angle here is an obtuse angle, and that's why this is an obtuse triangle. This one is no brainer. Okay, the third angle will always be an acute angle. Okay, so another way to classify triangles is by their sides with the same length. Okay, again, we talked about same length means are congruent segments. So think about the word congruent segments. It's basically sides with the same length. Okay, so we have two congruent segments here in an isosceles triangle, and you have three congruent segments here in an equilateral triangle. Okay, example number one, draw a triangle with one obtuse angle and two congruent sides. Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to draw an obtuse angle, okay, because it's asking draw a triangle with one obtuse angle and no congruent sides. Okay, then classify the triangle. So first thing we need to do is draw an obtuse angle. Okay, the two segments of the angle should have different lengths, and this is a good example of that. This is an obtuse. Bring this down a little bit right there. Okay, this is an obtuse angle where these two segments do not have the same measure. Next thing we need to do is, after we draw our obtuse angle, we simply connect the two segments to form a triangle. So we are going to connect that segment to that segment, and this is what we get right there. The triangle is an obtuse scalene triangle. Okay, no two sides are equal, so therefore it's a scalene triangle. And since one angle is obtuse, it's called an obtuse scalene triangle. Okay? All right, do the got it problem. Find and let's see if you understand example number one. Okay, let's take a look at example number two. Classify the triangle and the house by its angles and by its sides. Now again, look at the house. Look at that hash mark right there. That hash mark indicates that the two sides are congruent. So if you have two sides that are congruent, we know right away that that is an isosceles triangle. So if you look at carefully, the triangle has one obtuse angle. That this is our obtuse angle right here. And by those using those two hash marks, we know that two sides are congruent. So it is an obtuse isosceles triangle. Obtuse isosceles triangle because it has an obtuse angle and two sides that are congruent. Okay? So do the guided problem letter B and let's see if you understand example number two. Let's take a look at angles of a triangle in this case. So in words, when you talk about angles of a triangle, the sum of the measures of the angles of a triangle equals 180. So if you use a model, this is how it looks like. So basically in a triangle, in any triangle, the sum of all the angles inside the triangle will equal 180 degrees. So x degrees plus y degrees plus y plus z equals 180 degrees. Okay, if we represent that algebraically, this is how it's going to look like. Okay, x plus y plus z is equal to 180 degrees. Okay, let's use angles of a triangle and let's see how it works in the next example. So you can write and solve an equation to find the missing angle measure of a triangle. I just took a sip there of my water. So let's take a look at this triangle right here. This is 43 degrees as indicated by the arrow. This is 119 degrees, which is an obtuse angle. And this one we don't know. So we want to find the measure of angle Z. Remember, the measure of angle Z is this one right here. So knowing that the sum of the angles in a triangle equal 180 degrees from this concept right here, we will use that to find the measure of angle Z. So the first thing we need to do is, okay, we have to understand that the sum of all angles inside the triangle equals 180 degrees. That means if I am going to get the measure of angle Z, plus 43 right there, plus 119 right there, that should equal 180 degrees. If I simplify this, 43 plus 119 will give me 162. So the measure of angle Z plus 162 equals 180 degrees. Now this becomes a two-step equation. This is what we want to find. This is our x. So for us to find the measure of angle Z or our x, we subtract 162 to both sides of the equation. Doing that, 180 minus 62 is 18, and we simply bring down the measure of angle Z. This becomes 0. So now we have the measure of angle Z is equal to 18 degrees in this particular problem. Okay? So do the got it problem. Let's see if you understand example number 3. And let's do the last example, example number 4. And example number 4 is a word problem as always. Okay? The Alabama state flag is shown. What is the missing measure in the angles? So let's take a look at the Alabama state flag. This is an obtuse angle which measures 110 degrees, an acute angle that measures 35 degrees. We want to find the measure of x. So if we are going to create a triangle, this is how our triangle looks like. Oops, sorry. Okay. That's how our triangle looks like. Okay, we want to find the measure of angle x. Okay. So to find the measure, the missing measure, write and solve an equation. So we simply add these three angle measures. 35 plus 110 plus x should equal 180 degrees. Again, this is according to definition of what the sum of angles in a triangle. So x plus 110 plus 35 equals 180 degrees. Let's simplify 110 plus 35, which is 145. So x plus 145 equals 180 degrees. And to solve for x, this is a one-step equation. We simply subtract 145 to both sides of the equation. Doing that, this disappears, and 180 minus 145 will give us 35. So x equals 35. Therefore, in this problem, the missing measure is 35 degrees. Do the last problem, see if you understand example number 4, and we are done with this lesson. Thanks for watching.